Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Septic Systems 101, brought to you by the Private Well class. The Private Well class is hosted by the Illinois State Water Survey at the University of Illinois and is sponsored, funded, and supported by the Rural Community Assistance Partnership and the US EPA. To get started, we're just going to start off with a few housekeeping items. We do offer NEHA CEs for this webinar. Just keep in mind that you can only use the CEs for once per credentialing cycle. So what that means is if you watch this on July 1st, 2024, you can't retake the course until after June 30th in 2026. So you'll see down here in the bottom right-hand corner that our last two webinars were presented on July 12th of 23 and July 11th of 2024. If you need, we can provide you a certificate of attendance, a copy of the slide deck, completed NEHA forms, and if you're in Illinois, we do also offer LEHP credit. As I said before, this is part of the Private Well class, which is brought to you by RCAP, and we're here to support private well owners as well as septic owners as we're presenting today on those systems. This does follow our free well owner course, which is available at our website, privatewellclass.org. It's a 10-lesson class that is separate from these webinars. So be sure to go to our website and check those out. This will be recorded and available at our privatewellclass.org and also on our YouTube channel. Just know that the CEs are not available if you are watching the recording. And then the last thing I want to mention is we will have time for questions at the end of the webinar. So be sure and put those in either the chat or the questions, and we will get to those at the end. So first off, I want to give a very warm welcome to our expert panelist, Jim Starbird. We appreciate him taking time out of his day to join us. Jim is going to be helping answer the questions that were submitted before the webinar, as well as those that are turned in during the webinar. Jim is the Regional Director of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island for RCAP Solutions. So Jim, again, welcome. We appreciate you being here today. My name is Sally Dolan. I work here at the Illinois State Water Survey as an environmental public health specialist with the Private Well class. And then for any of you who have done these webinars, you all know Steve Wilson. He is the lead of the Water and Public Health program here at the Water Survey, and he's also a groundwater hydrologist. And then the two people that you won't necessarily hear from today are behind the scenes. We have Katie Buckley and Aaron Huggett, who are making sure that the webinar moves well today. Again, I mentioned that our funding comes from RCAP. If you're not familiar with RCAP, it is a partnership between 6 nonprofit organizations that spread across the United States, providing technical help to the rural communities. If you're not familiar with them, I recommend that you look at this map, find the region that covers your state, and get to know them. I work at the Illinois State Water Survey, and it's an honor to be a member of this establishment. It started in 1895 as a way to address cholera and typhoid outbreaks in the state of Illinois. And from that point, it has grown into a large survey. We have over 120 employees, and we do research all over the state as well as other areas. Now, today we're going to be talking about septic systems, and we've come a long way from when we started off with just privies in our backyard to the systems that we have today. This is a fun diagram because it says, it is believed that any 14-year-old schoolboy of average intelligence and mechanical ingenuity can, by following these plans, build a sanitary privy for his home. I don't know how many 14-year-olds would be able to follow these plans today, but it just shows how far we have come in a society from an outhouse to the advanced systems that we have. Another fun picture that we have from our files is we have this picture that was taken circa 1915 of one of Urbana's first septic systems. So you can see in the background of the picture that you have the developing town of Urbana, Illinois, and this was one of their first septic systems. Now, when we talk about septic systems, this is a major home purchase. So I found this little clip here that I'm going to play for you, just showing exactly how big of a home purchase this truly is. So that's just a fun little way to start off our talk here about septic systems. And it really is a major home purchase. According to Angie's List, the average cost in the US is anywhere from $3,500 to $11,700 to install a septic system. And if you have a specialty system that requires engineering, it can be as high as $20,000 to $25,000 to get some of those systems. So it is a huge, major home purchase that a lot of people struggle with trying to make sure that they can have a system installed that meets their needs. So why is it important to treat this wastewater? Well, the reason it's so important to spend that money to make sure you have the right system for your property is you're trying to remove four major groups of contaminants from your sewage. You have the harmful viruses and bacteria. You have the solids, both organic and inorganic. You have nutrients that can cause issues if you get too much nitrogen or phosphorus coming out of your system. And then any chemicals that you may put down your toilet can also cause issues. So when you combine a proper design, a proper installation, good operation, and good maintenance, that can be an economical and effective treatment for getting that wastewater where it can be released back into the environment. Now, septic systems, how do they relate to public health? Well, there are a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. One of the main things is in the past, there were things that were used that are no longer acceptable. You know, a straight pipe emptying into the stream in the back is no longer acceptable. Cesspools, for instance, I know the state of Hawaii is actively working to update 88,000 cesspools that spread across all the islands. I just learned that Gila County in Arizona, they got a grant in 2024, and so they're using that money to help replace cesspools in their county. So we now understand the environmental impact that these systems are having, and so we need to help get those up to code where they're no longer a risk to public health. As a homeowner, you also need to know, where is your drain field? How does it affect my well? How does it affect my neighbor's well? And then how deep is my well? Do you have a shallow well that, could have an influence of surface water, which could be an issue? Or do you have a deep well that's a little more protected? These are the things that we need to consider when we think about septic systems and public health. Just a couple definitions. I know I've had OWTS on a couple slides, so that stands for an on-site wastewater treatment system. An OWTS is kind of a generic term, and it covers any kind of decentralized system so one that uses these natural processes or mechanical components to treat the sewage, and it can be from one or more than one dwelling, building, or structure. Where an individual system, also known as a septic system, really just refers to a system that treats one facility or one dwelling. So most of what we're going to be talking about today will be on septic systems because we're doing this for the homeowner, so they understand the system that is in their backyard. And the reason it's so important to cover is because 1 in 5 homes in the United States relies on a septic system for their wastewater treatment. So, what is wastewater? When we talk about wastewater, it comes in two forms. We have black water and gray water. And the way to differentiate those are black water is the water that contains pathogens. So when you flush your toilet, all the bacteria from the human body makes that black water. We also include the dishwasher in this because since it's an area of food prep, the food could also have those pathogens on it as well. When it comes to an OWTS, we divide it into 4 components. The first one is we have the plumbing or the collection. So these are just the pipes that connect your toilet, your sink, your dishwasher to your septic system that's out in the backyard. Whenever you get out to the backyard, then you start getting into pre-treatment, which is typically your septic tank, advanced treatment if it's needed, and then you have your final treatment and dispersal. And we'll talk a little bit more about those 3 right now. So with the pre-treatment or the septic tank, what this does is this is where the water first enters and it gets divided into 3 layers. So your fats, oils, and grease will float to the top, and that creates the scum layer. And then the solids fall to the bottom and create the sludge layer. And between there, you have your liquid that will go out into your drain field, which is called the effluent. In some cases, you may either not be able to have room for a traditional or a conventional septic system, so you may not be able to have a septic tank. You may need to have it replaced with something like an aerobic treatment unit, or you may need advanced treatment after your septic tank if you run into some unsuitable sites and soils. And these advanced treatments allow solutions so you can still have a septic system even if you have soil that can't necessarily hold a drain field. So examples of the advanced treatment are ATUs, media filters, constructed wetlands, those sorts of things that will add more than just your conventional septic system. And then the final is you have your drain field, which is also can be called the soil treatment area, leach field. They're all referring to the area in the yard where that water will finally disperse and trickle through the soil, which will trap those microbes and make it where it can then re-enter the groundwater in a safe manner. So how are septic systems designed and sized? For sizing, it really goes off of your household size. Typically, it's the number of bedrooms because you'd want to make sure that you cover it in the event that you have guests come over and stay. You don't want to ruin your party by having the septic system overflowing because it's not sized correctly. You also have to consider the soil type. Is it a tight clay? Is it a sandy soil? Are you on a steep slope? Is it a flat surface? Are you on a very small lot compared to a couple acres? So all these different things are taken into consideration whenever you design and size a system. And the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind is your local regulations. There are no federal regulations that everyone across the United States follows. It is down to a lot of the county and local governments that will decide based off of their soil types and their geology on what regulations need to be put in place. And keep in mind that your soil conditions and site conditions can also vary widely across the nation and even in some neighborhoods. I know I've been on sites where you'll have a conventional system on one neighbor, but the next neighbor has too steep of a slope, and so they had to install an ATU. There are several different types of septic systems, and we're not going to go into each individual one necessarily. If you would like more information on the different types of septic systems, I recommend that you go to the epa.gov/septic/types-septic-systems. And they do a great job. They have all these wonderful drawings, and then they also explain the different systems and how they work. So if you want information on a specific system, I recommend that you visit the EPA's website. And the reason I can't go into all of them is they range from very simple to very complex. So it would be all day trying to explain all the different types of systems. Because they do vary so much. So, in the bottom left-hand corner here, this is actually an engineer drawing for a septic system in northern Michigan. This house is within, I believe, 200 feet of the shore of Lake Superior, so it's the minimum that it can be back from the lake shore. So they have a very extensive system that's been put in place. This is actually a photo from the side yard where the septic system is. So down where the scaffolding is on the kind of the middle left of the picture, there's the septic tank is down there. It then pumps up into the peat filters, which you can see on the bottom left-hand corner with the black tops. So there's two peat pods, and then to the right in the grassy area where the pipes are, it goes into a recirculating sand filter before it exits the system. But the owner of the property was willing to go through all of this because these are the views from his back deck. So his view of Lake Superior definitely came at a cost when it came to the septic system. Now we'll have a little quiz. If you look at this picture, you can probably be able to tell me exactly where the septic system is. So when you look at this picture, this was actually, Steve and I went out to do this assessment, and when we looked at Google Earth, all the yard was green, didn't notice anything, and then it came time we were going to meet at the house, so we pulled up Google Maps to get our directions to the site. And when we pulled up the image from Google Maps, this is what we were met with. So you can easily see that in the fenced-in area to the right of the house, you see the perfect rectangle where they had dug up the septic tank to have it pumped out. And then you can see that there are 3 trenches to the drain field. 2 of them are very brightly green with lush grass. And then the third one is to the top. You'll see how the green grass is growing towards the top of the picture. So this is obviously a case of septic system failure. So what causes a septic system to have problems? One of the number one things is poor maintenance. Maintaining your septic system is extremely important. And making sure that you keep it regularly pumped, regularly checked is paramount, and making sure that you get the longest life out of your system. You also want to make sure that you're not overloading the system. So you want to make sure that you don't have any leaking or broken plumbing. Stagger the uses of when you're taking showers versus doing laundry versus washing the dishes. You also want to check with your local regulatory agency if you've made changes to the house. For instance, the picture I just showed, that was a case that they actually added bedrooms on. More people had moved in, but the septic system was not brought up to meet the size of the new family that moved into the home. You also want to make sure that the system's designed and installed correctly. It's very important to use a contractor. If they have licensing in your state or your county, make sure that you go with someone who knows what they're doing. I know a lot of people want to do a DIY. Oh, I can do that myself, but you have to make sure that you are properly designing and installing the system to make sure you don't run into problems. You can also have physical damage of your septic system. So you never want to have anyone drive heavy equipment over your field. And tree roots can definitely be a major problem if you have trees too close to your septic system. And then the final thing that I have listed is biomat formation. You do need a thin layer, but when that biomat gets too thick, you're going to run into a lot of problems. What you can and can't put into your septic system is very simple. I've heard a lot of people refer to it as the three P's. So you can put poop, pee, and paper down your septic tank. You shouldn't put anything else. So all of these other items that are listed, just they should not go down your toilet. You should use your garbage and throw them out that way. Never put them down the toilet. And then it's also important to make sure that you're using safe cleaners, avoid harsh ones, and anything that may affect the bacteria that is in your septic tank. So when it comes to what do I look for? How do I know if my system is failing? One of the main things if you have a drain field is if you have that thick, deep green grass growing on your yard and everything else is brown and dried up from the summer months, you know you have a problem. It may actually be so bad that when you walk on it, you can actually hear and feel the water squish underneath your feet. Sometimes you'll notice a smell, other times you won't. I know on the 4th of July, my husband and I were um, going to see the fireworks, and there was a home along the way where there were cars parked on both sides of the road having a big party. And the first thing we noticed was the septic system was already starting to produce a smell because they had way too many people using the septic system. Um, but just because your system's failing does not mean you will always have a smell. Sometimes it doesn't turn septic again, and so you may or may not have that smell. If you get your well water tested and it tests high for nitrates or coliform bacteria, that's another sign that you may be having a problem with your septic system. Could also mean that your neighbor is having problems with their septic system. But that's why we recommend that you test for those two once a year, is so you can keep an eye on if there's any problems with your well, having surface water infiltrate it, or if there's problems with your or a neighbor's septic system. And then the last thing, if you hear that gurgling or have sewage backup, then you definitely have a problem with your septic system that requires immediate attention. Maintenance is key when it comes to a septic system. You want to make sure that you're getting your tank regularly pumped and clean the effluent filter if you have one. For advanced units such as ATUs, you want to make sure that you have a service contract. I know there's a lot of counties in Illinois that require a 6-month contract. And so just be aware that if you do have those advanced systems, they require a little bit more than your conventional system does. Anytime you get your system checked or have it pumped, make sure you keep records. You can actually use those records whenever you go to sell your home to increase the value. And then you can also use those records. So if you do have a problem, you can go back and see what's been checked. The EPA actually has a wonderful program called Septic Smart Week, which is in September. But I recommend that you look at their information all year long, not just the 1 week. They have videos and examples and give a lot of great tips on how to be septic smart. And it's a great source for a homeowner because it gives them all those basic things that they need to understand when they own a septic system. And then the main thing is a septic system will not last forever. It will eventually fail. I've heard stories of people, I've had this for 50 years and it's never had a problem. Um, it's still going to fail at some point, but good management and maintenance will definitely prolong that life where you can get the maximum out of it. So there is some things that you can do to help your septic system have longevity. Um, One of the first things is to maintain the area around your tank and your drain field. Make sure that everything's accessible. I've seen a lot of people where they get tired of mowing around the PVC pipes in the yard, so they cut them flush to the ground. Don't do that. Leave those so that way you have that inspection port, and make sure that the manholes where they can get to where they can easily maintain your system. You also want to reduce the flow of water into your system. Um, we do not recommend doing sump pumps, whirlpools, or softener backwash into your system, but you will need to check with your local regulations on if they allow you to use a dry well or not. Then only put wastewater into your septic system. We all already went over that, but it's just make sure that you're not putting those don'ts down the drain because that can definitely shorten the life of your system. And then last is when you maintain your tank and have it inspected, make sure that you're measuring the solids. If you use a septic contractor, they can use a tool called a sludge judge to measure the scum and sludge layers. Now, this is a good diagram that we've been able to find that goes over how to tell how often you should be pumping your septic tank. This is just a guide. Um, Depending on your specific situation, you may need to do it more frequently or less frequently. But how you use this guide is say you have a family of four and you have a tank that's 1,500 gallons, then you should plan on pumping the tank every 4.2 years. And so you just come across and come down, and where that column and row meet, that is the estimated time that it will need to go between pumpings. Now, it would be wonderful if you never had any issues, but if you do have issues or if you have questions, where do you go for the information? Well, there's actually a lot of information available out there. And some of your best local resources are your public health departments, your cooperative extension, and then you never want to forget the professional septic contractors. They're the ones who are out there every day, all day long. They know the area, they know the soil, they know the geology, and they can be a good help because they're the ones who are trained on how to install and maintain these systems. Another great resource is the EPA. The EPA has actually a dedicated web page for septic systems, and it is very extensive. So not only does it go over all the Septic Smart material, but they also have tips on care and maintenance, how to get funding, different partnerships that are available, and other resources. I recommend that there's so much information on this website that you really just have to go yourself, look around and see what information is there and what would pertain to what you do either for your job or as a homeowner. Another great source is NAURA.com. So that's the National On-Site Wastewater Recycling Association. And with NAURA, it is a group for all of the decentralized wastewater professionals. They can become members of NAURA, But then they also have septic system resources for homeowners. So they have a great homeowners on-site system guide and record keeping folders and just a lot of different things that are very useful to a homeowner. Another resource that's a little bit more for the wastewater professional is the onsitewastewater.info. This used to be H2O&M was the website, but it's actually recently been redesigned. It was originally created by the University of Minnesota, but it has been taken over by a nonprofit organization. And so what this offers is it offers generic stock and boilerplate information, as well as a way for a contractor to enter um, information on a specific site. And with that, they are able to create a personalized PDF guide that can be printed off and given to the homeowner um, to help them understand their system. Now, while they don't cover every scenario that exists across the United States, they have done a good job to try to make sure they cover the majority of them. Another great resource is RCAP. I've already mentioned that they have 6 regional offices. So I would recommend that you look at your state, find which nonprofit covers your area, and find out more about them. So I'm in Illinois, so the Great Lakes Community Action Partnership is who I would reach out to for information. But if you go to their websites, you'll find that they have just a variety of different programs that really help the rural communities. So it's everything from water, wastewater, housing, community development. They cover a lot of those different things. One tool that we have is we have the OWTS assessment tool. We developed this tool in 2023 and released it. And what this is this is a tool where um, a wastewater professional, such as a contractor or an EHP, would be able to take this. It's a fillable PDF. You take it out to the field and you can use it to do an assessment of the septic system. You can use it alone, or we do have a companion tool for wells. So you could also assess the well at the same time. And it opens up better communication between the assessor and the homeowner. It's a great way where they can have one document that tells them everything about their septic system. It gives them a snapshot of what it was like that day. With the tool, you include pictures and diagrams to really give them a comprehensive overview of their system. And those assessments, both the well and the septic assessment, can be found at privatewellclass.org/assessments. So what is the private well class? We are not just limited to these webinars and our 10-lesson curriculum. Again, the 10-lesson curriculum is separate from our webinars, so they're 2 different things. We are going to be expanding to an 11th lesson for our curriculum, which will specifically be on septic systems. Since so many well owners are also septic system owners, we wanted to give them more information. So that will be coming out soon. We also have our partner newsletter, social media, and YouTube pages. And then in April of 2024, we launched a national private well hotline and knowledge base or help center. That's my main job, is I handle those hotline calls. And so we're really trying to spread our outreach and get more people to know about our hotline and help center. When it comes to the private well class, we do have our monthly webinars. Our next one is going to be, is my water safe to drink? Common questions about public wells. And that will be coming to you August 5th of 2025, starting at 1 p.m. Central Time. This one is going to be hosted by Erin Huggett. She also helps me with the hotline. So if you call our hotline, Erin and I are the two that you get to speak to. And so Erin's going to be covering our webinar for us next month. If you would like to enroll in the private well class or have a homeowner enroll in it, from our homepage, you can click on sign up for the class and it will bring you to this page. And so you can enroll in the class that way. Not only do we have it available in English, but we also have it available in Spanish. We were lucky enough to have a graduate student help us to take everything and translated it into an understandable form of Spanish. So we're really thankful that we have that available in both English and Spanish. And so if you ever have anyone that needs those services, please direct them to our website. Then we have our help center. This was one of my projects when I first came on to the private well class. And so we now have over 150 articles divided up into 9 categories. And then we have 3 ways that you can reach out to us. You can either just search through the help center and find information. You can chat with us. So we do have a chat bot that will answer the basic questions. It only pulls information that we've provided it. So you're not just getting random answers from the internet. These have been approved by us before the chatbot will use it. And then you can always call us. And our number one feedback that we've gotten so far is, I can't believe I got a human on the first call. And so it's been a really great experience to be able to be a part of the hotline, because we are able to have a one-on-one conversation and help these well owners figure out their problems and get solutions. We also have our YouTube page. So this webinar, as well as all of our other webinars, are featured on our YouTube page. And so you can go there and you can watch previous recordings. We also have our private well conferences, and we'll be having our 2025 private well conference. Those will be displayed here before too long. And so you can also find all that information and watch those videos if you ever have questions or want to go back to a webinar. We do have those available for you. Now, one of our newest additions that we have here is, not only do we have the private well class, but we also have decentralizedwastewater.org. And with this is a site that is designed for decentralized wastewater, the industry. So we're looking for the wastewater professionals. And this is, we have an event calendar. So anytime there's upcoming trainings, we have those trainings are listed in our calendar. We also have a resource library where they're able to say they want to learn more about mound systems. They can type in mound systems and their state and be able to search through and find documents that will help them understand the different systems and different parts of the decentralized industry. And again, that can be found at decentralizedwastewater.org. We also have our Tap Talk, which is our podcast. This is done by Steve and Jennifer Wilson, and they will interview different people who are part of the well industry as well as the wastewater industry, and try to raise awareness across rural America about our drinking water. Okay, so now we are getting ready to go into our Q&A session. We received a lot of questions in advance, but if you have questions that you want Jim or I to answer, be sure and put those in the chat or the questions. And Katie will be sure to get those to us where we can answer them at the end. I do have a little bit of extra time today since we have Jim. So we're looking forward to getting started. Now, I did throw this first question in. Jim said I'll answer everything except for this one. And so I was going to leave this question out. And this morning, I actually received the on-site installer newsletter. And so I was just looking through it to see what it had. And it actually had an article about what, membrane bioreactors. So I decided to go ahead and throw this information in here. The article was written by Sarah Hager, who we have the utmost respect for. Sarah is definitely an expert in the septic industry. And so I felt very comfortable in throwing this information in, knowing that Sarah is in the top of the field. So her information would be the most relevant and the latest on this technology. So MBR is what is called a membrane bioreactor. And so what it does is it combines two types of systems. So it combines aerobic system treatment along with membrane filtration separation. So it's combining these two technologies into one system. It was developed back in the 1960s, kind of stagnated, and then they made significant modifications in the 90s. And it's really gaining a lot of traction here lately because it's actually very, very effective. So it can remove high levels of organic materials, and with some of the advanced removal processes, it can actually eliminate 60 to 90% total nitrogen and phosphorus. And it leaves a much smaller footprint than both conventional systems and ATUs. So it's really helpful whenever it does come to a small yard that doesn't have a lot of area. This could be a good replacement for that. And then they're so efficient that it actually has potential for reuse of the effluent. So areas like in the Southwest where water is becoming scarcer and scarcer, these systems may become more and more popular as a way to reuse that effluent for other purposes. Okay, Jim, are you ready to get started?
Sure am. Afternoon, everyone.
Okay, Jim, would you like me to read the questions and then you
Sure.
answer it? Okay, so
Sure.
please make sure mound systems are covered. And I went to the Nower webpage and threw this diagram in there just so you had something to go off of as well.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the Northeast where I work, mound systems are treated just like any other leach field that, you have to have normally a covering of grass, if you will, passive recreation on any of the mounded systems, if you will. Unless it's like a recirculating sand filter or whatnot, then they would be more of a gravel base. But most of the time, a normal just mounded up system to get away from the extend the distance of treatment before groundwater would normally just be, covered with grass, if you will.
Sure. So the next question is, what is the typical distance of direct saturation of the soil from drain field outflow?
That is very state specific and even site specific. I work in 3 states in southern New England, and each one of the states has a different distance. Primarily I'm based in Massachusetts, and our statewide is 4 feet of unsaturated dirt before it gets down to the water, the highest water level. You get down to say like the Cape Cod, and it's even local boards of health bring it all the way up to 6 feet. But then you go to Connecticut, and it's a lot smaller distance. I've heard the nationwide standard is 2 feet, but again, it's very state and site specific. So take any of those distances with a grain of salt, and kind of see what it is in your area. They might be down to the local county or local health department, depending on what state you are, or a statewide average. So like I said, those distances are completely state and local specific. So to give you an accurate answer where you are, when I can't give that.
Sure, yeah. So it's just really important to make sure you talk with your local regulatory agency and find out what it is for your area then.
Yeah, that's kind of on everything on septic on-site wastewater systems. It's very, very state and local specific.
Exactly. Next question is, what can make a septic tank not an option on your property?
Many different things. Too close to water, not enough footprint of your lot size to put it in. The groundwater level is too high. I usually see this happen in waterfront properties. Sometimes they really have, they don't have any more, they don't have the land to put anything in, if you will. And they have to do what we call a tight tank, basically a septic tank without an outlet. And it has a float in there with an alarm at 75% full. It sets an alarm off, and you got to call the pumper truck. But there's also what we call innovative and alternative technology here, but more advanced treatment systems that you can bring down the footprint of your leach field, how far is the groundwater table. But again, those are state approval specific as well. But there's options, but sometimes there is no option. The house was built a long time ago, very, very small plot of land. It's in waterfront. You got neighboring wells. You got, sometimes the only option really is a tight tank, because it was built. A lot of these properties, especially here in New England, were built long before we had septic regulations.
Sure. Okay, so the next question, how do I know if my septic tank is working properly in the winter?
And the only really way to do it is to take a look inside your septic tank. If it's the leach field's not working, you'll see that say you have a snowfall and there's part of your grass that's doesn't have snow on it, if you will, kind of like the green in the summertime. But the only really way to do it would be open it up. I mean, septic treatment, slows down. It's temperature based like we are, but there should be some sort of still biologic activity going on if the house is still occupied and there's flow going in it. Now, a seasonal property is a whole different story, because then you're not feeding it warm water, you're not giving it any more nutrition. So a seasonal system will be even more affected by a winter than a year-round property.
Sure. Do you have anything else that you would like to mention about seasonal properties? It wasn't asked, but I'm sure there's people on here that may need to know that information.
The one thing about it is I think you already mentioned it on 4th of July is, here, at least here in New England, a lot of seasonal properties are summer properties, and they open them up on Memorial Day and they close them up on Labor or Columbus Day. Maybe they open it up Memorial Day weekend and have a big party. They got to remember that system is a biological system that hasn't seen any flow in 6 months, and then all of a sudden you're just inundating it with, probably more flow than it's designed for. So kind of keep that in mind when you're you're going 0 to 100 with it, if you will.
So, how do I find out what kind of system was put in by prior owners?
Best way to do it is your local or county health department, most likely, or your environmental division bureau of the state would have those records, depending on what state you're in and how they're regulated, if you will. The older the system is, the less likely that there'll be a record for it. But usually things built, it's in the 90s on, usually there's some sort of record, yeah, at one of those divisions, if you will.
Next question is it still required to be at least 50 feet away, even if the well is plugged?
That's another very local decision. How far it is. I know it's an abandoned well, and different states will have different regulations. A well that's working, say in Massachusetts, you have to be 100 feet from your leach field, 50 feet from your septic tank. But I've heard other states are different. I believe it's 75 in one of our local states, abutting Massachusetts. So again, it's very specific, state specific, local specific. But in general, farther away a leach field in a septic in a private well can be, the better. And it's always better to have your well upgrade than downgrade a septic system. Unfortunately, I've seen, it's not really in code. It really should be that, placement, of the grading of where these are too. That's one thing to have the distance, another thing to have the flow coming towards you.
Yeah. I would say the other thing I would be concerned about is who plugged the well and how well did they plug the well? So you also want to take that into consideration. You don't want to get it too close just in case it wasn't plugged correctly.
Exactly, definitely.
Okay, so our next question is, how do you prevent discharges from a septic system? And I'm assuming this question means um, that you've had failure and now you have the effluent coming to the surface.
Yeah, in that regard, you could always basically turn your septic tank into a tight tank. Septic company can come out and cap the outlet pipe and then put that alarm system I mentioned in. That would keep it from leaving that septic tank at that point. We involve a lot of pumping until the system gets repaired, but it would keep it from becoming an environmental and health issue. And keep the being of the house being able to be occupied depending on how bad the surfacing is and the time of year, etc.
And
If it's
again,
talking
you would
about
have,
solids coming out of the septic tank, then an effluent T filter would be a good idea. Those kind of two ways I kind of took that question.
sure. Does a septic system need to be cleaned out every so many years, regardless of the amount of use? For example, one person living in a single family home.
Again, it's septic tank specific, how big the septic tank is. One person in 1,000 gallon. I think a couple slides near the end, you had the table there, and that's a pretty good way to calculate, if you will. If you're one person in, say, a 2,000 gallon septic tank, yeah, you could probably get away with 5-10 years without pumping it. Even with 1,000 gallon, you're probably talking at least 3 or 4 years. So it all depends on how much you put down and how big the septic tank is as well. Another good way to do it is if you have a trusted pumper that comes out and pumps it and is honest with you, like you could have gone a year or two more. There's not many solids in this. Then kind of go by that if nothing else changes in your house, as far as what you're putting down the system. But less of people, the longer you can go, basically.
Okay. Next question is, what are the top 5 things you should keep constant maintenance of and its time schedule? I like that they were very specific with choose the top 5 things.
Yeah, the top. I said the number one thing is a pumping schedule that you can rely on that works for your tank. I mean, all the other things for a regular septic system, it's all about what you're putting down the drain. If you're, like you said, the 3 Ps only, yeah, and then I think that's that, and pumping it how often you need to, depending on how the solids are getting built up. Those are probably the 2 top things. The other 3 things really, I would just do the top 2 actually, because I don't want to overcomplicate it. Unless you have some sort of more advanced system, some kind of system that has pumps or aerators or other things like that. A straight gravity system really showing me the 2 things: what you're putting down the drain and how often you're pumping it.
Sounds good. Okay, so for the next one, I'm interested in any recommendations, if any, on direct septic system inspections via vent caps, etc.
I've seen this more now that they're bringing the cameras down into the tanks. Sometimes they come through the vent, sometimes they go through the actual septic tank into the pipes themselves. It's really a great way to get a better view on what's actually going on, especially in the leach field. You want to make sure that those pipes are, the water's draining out and not pooling and doesn't have a place to go in that leach field. Without a camera like that, you're really talking opening the D box in the septic tank and looking at tank levels. But that's definitely a great way to inspect it, especially if you're, purchasing a property, if you will, to really get a good look of what is going on with the system. Or if you're having problems, to get a better diagnosis of what's going on. But I think it's a great idea of if the septic company you're working with has that ability to use those, those cameras.
I say, do you have any specific examples of where you were able to find something using the camera compared to if you had just done a typical inspection?
Not off the top of my head, but I've seen some presentations on different things that they found. They can, because once you're going down the pipes, you can see if there's a crack in them, if there's a roots growing into the septic pipes in the leach field that you won't be able to diagnose, especially by looking at the D box. Is that if the water's draining out of the D box into the pipes, everything looks good as far as that goes. But you won't be able to see like when roots start intrusion and all that. So definitely an advancement in the technology to get a really good look at what's going on. And even like the running the pipes going from the house into the septic tank in to see if have they cracked, have they drop, have they had a drop, a bow in the pipe. There's a lot of different things that can be by looking at those those cameras.
Oh, for the next two sections that I have here, it's actually multiple questions, but they all kind of get answered together. So the first kind of set of questions is any specific brands of bath tissue to encourage or avoid use of? And then I also put in here, is it wise to add Rid-X to your septic if your service guy says that if there was a lot of paper? So for that one, I'd like for you to talk about the toilet paper issue, and then in the next one, we'll talk about additives.
Yeah. Well, first we'll say I'm funded by the federal agencies, so we can't really recommend or discourage any brand, if you will. There is a number of toilet paper that companies that have septic safe insignias on there. I'm not exactly sure what goes into getting that. That might be a good way to look at it. Also, if the paper is not breaking down and if you're not using the absorbent amount, it might be worth looking into if there's supposed to be a vent system that was removed, like you mentioned, taking away the candy canes because people don't like it, messing up the look of their yard. I've seen that before, that all of a sudden solids weren't breaking down. They had to pump a lot, and it turns out you look at the original blueprint and there was a vent there, and well, the vent's not there anymore. So there might be a reason, yeah. But maybe if you look for the septic safe insignia on it, maybe that's a better way to do it. But
Okay.
definitely don't use like flushable wipes or anything, because those are notorious for not breaking down in the system.
Yes. I'm gonna say I actually went to a conference and it was the presentation was put on by the Georgia Extension, and I spent the probably 10-15 minutes of the presentation shaking a jar. And what we did is we took different brands of toilet paper and we put them in water in glass jars, tightened the lid, and then just shook it. And then we compared how they broke down just shaking it. Um, and then, at the end, it was like, okay, think of this as the brand that you're using and it's going into your septic system. If it doesn't break down like the others do, maybe you should consider changing tissue. And so that was a fun way and an easy way to see, how easily does your bath tissue break down when, you add it to water and agitate it. So that was a fun little hands-on activity and really showed how the different tissues, do or do not break down.
Yeah, and I would imagine like the thicker the tissue, the longer it's going to be. You know, lots of different kinds out there, triple comfort, this and that. So,
Okay, for the
probably imagine the thinner the tissue, the quicker it will break down. Just the amount of biomass in it, basically.
that's exactly what we found with shaking the jars.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I
the
know.
next one,
We used to have a family like summer RV that instead put, and I know we had to get special toilet paper that was RV specific. It was very, very thin, so I imagine that broke down very easily. So
yeah, I'm sure that would be good for your septic system too.
yes, yeah. Like I said, though, you had to use a lot of it, so I don't know if you have a savings in the end.
Okay, for the next one, do I need to use additives to the system? Is Riddex good for your system or is baking yeast better? And my favorite, should I put a dead chicken in a new septic tank?
I'm gonna have to say no with the chicken. That's definitely not something I've ever heard of before. It seems like a lot of organic matter going in right off the bat. So, as far as additives, the easy answer is no. We put enough additives in ourselves just naturally. I have seen some rehabilitation system techniques to like fix a biomat in a leach field that they put additives in there as well as add aeration, and it breaks down the biomat. So those circumstances I've seen it work, or other technologies that require a little bit more biologics as they started up. But the normal gravity system that everyone has, no, you add enough by yourself, really. Just pay attention to what you're flushing down there and how often you're pumping. Really, the two things to keep an eye on.
Sure. Okay. Now we'll move on to, will flushing copper sulfate keep roots out of the drain field?
I would imagine it would, but at the same time, it would probably kill the biologics of your septic tank and leach field also. So I wouldn't recommend it. To keep roots out, I would recommend just removing, trees around that leach field and keeping a good distance around for any, large trees that have a, very large root base, if you will. That's probably your best technique. If they're already grown in there, there's ways to, kind of chisel them out, if you will.
Mhm.
But yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting copper sulfate down. I'm not exactly sure what it does to the biologics in there, but I can't imagine it would be good for it.
Yeah, I can't imagine it'd be good either. Okay, so one float continues to regularly get stuck on my system that is only 8 years old. What maintenance should be performed, or do I just need to replace it?
I would imagine if it's something that continuously keeps happening, it's probably just time to replace it. I've seen a lot of systems that the floats go pretty regularly, and it's a very common thing that needs to be replaced before other parts of the system. And from what I understand, it's pretty inexpensive too, depending on the accessibility to get to those floats. But I would just replace them at this point with limited knowledge of what's going on.
Okay. And then for the next one, aerator system optimization. What are the major considerations?
Well, I think the biggest thing is what your goal is with the optimization, the aerator optimization. Are you trying to get denitrification, which would require send it back into an unoxygen an anaerobic area to get the denitrification. A lot of the technologies, the manufacturers have some sort of place for the bacteria to grow, because the aerator system is optimizing the growth of the good bacteria that breaks down the waste. If there extra places that the bacteria can colonize, but if you have a manufacturing company that does this, they usually have all those scientific studies done, if you will. And I know in the states I work in that there's state approvals too to use any of these new these innovative alternative technologies, and they have to be proven at local test sites within the state, run by the state, if you will, or a local county health department. So I really look for the manufacturer and what they have for specs on those, with a lot of these different systems that are basically in a package for you from the companies.
Okay. Now we have moved into a 25-year-old home with a septic system. The former owner said that he's never had to pump out the tank and it was built with extra capacity. Septic system tests for our home purchase came back fine, no issues. Should I go ahead and have the tank pumped, or just wait and look for future signs of trouble?
I would pump it. That way you're starting fresh with your tank. And again, when they come and pump, ask what's going on, what they saw, and that it could have lasted longer or not. 25 years without pumping, that's quite excessive, depending on, regardless of how much capacity they have. But I would definitely pump it yourself and then kind of start fresh with the size of your family that's living in the house and how big the tank is, and kind of go from there.
All right, and it's just like my example where the new family moved in, and you know they they can't judge adding on bedrooms and the number of people they have compared to the previous owner where there were only two people, and so it may have lasted 25 years for them, but for the new homeowner, you have to look at your usage as well.
Yeah, in 25 years for any system, I think is just excessive. Once you start talking double digits, it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, they call it. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, and can dog and cat feces be discarded in a septic system?
Ideally, no. Again, it should be human PPP. It'd be best putting that in the trash and having it taken away like that. The cat feces, I'm sure that if you're scooping your litter box, there's going to be some litter with it. Dog feces, kind of bring it in to set and flush it down. When it's probably just best to remove it to the trash, if you will.
Okay. So, is there a concern using mainstream detergents or softeners leaching into drinking water when disposed into your septic system?
I imagine I'm going to take this question as like normal use. You're doing laundry and stuff, and that is not really linked to having problems in normal usage, if you usages. But again, the less chemicals you put down the system, the better. And one of the things we're starting to see too here in the Northeast is a coalition between areas of high septic density and PFAS findings in wells. So there's all sorts of chemicals in everything we use, detergents, even cosmetics, food products, you name it, and they all go down the drain. So limiting as much as possible, but at the same time, if it's just the mainstream normal detergent, dishwashing soap, stuff like that, it's you still have to live. So I just would, try to limit any dumping of large quantities down there. If you didn't want to use the detergent anymore, you didn't like the smell, I wouldn't suggest, just dumping the container down the thing. I'd rather just throw it away in the trash. So.
What advice do you give homeowners in regards to using pods for their laundry and their dishwasher?
I would imagine it's safe the way they use it. I mean, the companies came out with they're almost like the appropriate dosage for a load of laundry. So I kind of treat it like anything else, but again, the excessive of anything I think would damage the system. And there's disinfectants in it, which could break the biology down of the septic system. So, we all have to, live our lives and clean our dishes and our laundry, but, just try to, anything excessive that's beyond the scope of doing that is recommended just not to, keep putting it down there.
I'm gonna say I've seen questions about um, does the leftover plastic, is it gonna cause problems in the septic tank? And so I was at a meeting where they said that they recommend not using pods when it comes to a septic system. So I was just curious if you've heard anything in regards to that or not.
Not really, not too much. Microplastics is a big topic in environmental health now too. They seem to be coming from everything, anything and everything, if you will. So I think I saw an article that the microplastics came out of glass. I mean, I don't know how that happens, but
I'm not sure how that happens either.
so I think the better our lab technology gets, the more we're able to see the impact of what we do. Like
Sure.
some of the stuff, like in drinking water, we used to always talk, the lowest we ever went was parts per billion, but now we have drinking water standards of parts per trillion. So, you're really getting down the very minute levels. And I think we're just more conscious and able to see more what we're doing, the reaction to our actions, if you will.
Okay. And then our next question is, lots of consumer products say they are septic safe, but I'm skeptical. Should I be?
I would like to say no, but I mean, you never know. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure what goes into getting a septic safe label, so I can't really say either way. Like I mentioned, there's flushable wipes too, but even in on-site, even centralized wastewater, they're a huge problem on both ends. So, I don't want to say yes or no, but sometimes the track record isn't there.
I'm going to say, I actually watched a webinar about counterfeit water filters, and so I guess my advice would be that if it has that septic safe sticker on it, make sure it looks legitimate. Make sure that it's not smudged, that it's not worded just a little bit differently. Make sure that it actually says septic safe, and do your research and look online to see what stamps of approval the industry accepts, and make sure that that's the product, that the product matches what the industry recommends. So the next question is, what tests can I do to tell if groundwater contamination is coming from a leaking septic system versus another source?
I imagine you're talking about in your private well. The one I've seen in many of the cases is nitrate showing up and even getting at very high levels, even long before a total coliform issue is able to be detected. Actually, this is a public water system I was working with that had a malfunctioning septic system. And the nitrates got, all the way up to like 30, which is 3 times the drinking water standard. But they also were doing weekly bacterial tests and never had a bacterial or a total coliform hit. So nitrate's the number one. Then the bacteria, also ammonia, could be another one to check. But nitrate seems to be, on the cases that I worked with, are the one that really comes to light. If all of a sudden your nitrate is shot up, you're not in an area that has, a lot of fertilized use, and your nitrate was always elevated, but all of a sudden you did a water test before and you had, 1 or 2, and all of a sudden it's 15. Most likely it's either yours or your neighbor's septic system that's having a problem. And sometimes it doesn't even have to, this system I was mentioning, it wasn't showing any surfacing or anything like that. So.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions that we got ahead of time. So now I'm going to switch over to questions that we've gotten for today. Again, if you guys have any questions, be sure and put those in the chat and questions, and Katie can keep adding those to our document as we go through here. Okay, so I'm flying today, so we've got plenty of time here, Jim. So we'll have to come up with something to talk to if we only get 5 questions here. So the first question is I had a contractor wondering why he can't put 2 laterals in the same trench.
Well, the whole point of it is to have a place for the water to disperse. So, if you put 2 pipes in the same trench, it's going to have double the flow in that one trench, and sooner or later that trench is going to fill. And if there's one in each trench and they're more spread out, there's more soil for the water to grow into, and more area for a biomat to build up and not fail, if you will. So, the better to spread them out. Unless it's like really one long trench, then you could put 1 pipe in a very long trench, but 2 pipes, same trench, not a good idea.
Sure. The next question is, how much does an MRB cost? And I think they mean MBR, not MRB.
The only time I've ever worked in those kind of systems were very, very large on-site systems, over 10,000 gallons a day, and they had to be operated by wastewater treatment operators. So they were quite expensive. The ones I've seen. I have never worked with small residential ones, if you will. So I couldn't tell you what those are. But any kind of innovative upgrade to the septic tank is to the septic and traditional septic system is going to be much more money for the install and for the maintenance, because then you're talking pumps and treatment and sometimes sampling, depending on the state you are. So anything beyond the traditional system is, the costs go up, and there's more moving parts to worry about.
Yeah, and I would think that the maintenance on an MBR, having to worry about membranes and pumps and multiple things, would definitely increase your maintenance cost as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, any of these innovative alternative treatment systems are going to have more cost to them, but an MBR, like I said, I've only seen it in very large on-site systems, serving 100+ homes. So.
Sure. Okay, the next question is, what are the advantages or disadvantages of a leaching pit instead of a drain field?
Well, leaching pits are kind of like the old school way of doing things. We call them cesspools here in New England. So it's basically just a hole in the ground that everything drops into, and the water kind of filters through the bottom, and the solids are pumped up. a leach field with a septic tank, then D blocks, and then a leach field with multiple pipes has better separation of the solids in the water, better treatment within the septic tank, and then a much more even and spread out dispersal into the ground, which is going to give you better treatment for everything. It's much more environmentally friendly too, if you will, to the groundwater table and whatnot. Those aren't there, like a cesspool isn't even allowed to be built anymore. And a lot of places, in some communities, it's an automatic failure, basically. If there's a transfer of property and they have to do a septic inspection and they have a cesspool, it's an automatic failure. There's no sense of even doing the inspection. It's already over. So,
Sure.
and I've seen in Rhode Island, or in Narragansett Bay, they're actually mandated by the state to, regardless of if you're selling the property or not, everyone has to get rid of the cesspools in an environmentally sensitive area. And that's starting to happen too in Cape Cod. So, there's not a good treatment. So, they just basically have to be replaced.
Okay. The next question is, what is Riddex?
I would imagine it is extra good bacteria. Basically, up the biologics within the septic tank. I'm not exactly sure of, those but it's a biological additive, basically, for what I understand.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, too. What advice do you give to on-site wastewater system owners when flooding occurs?
Well, if the system gets flooded, try to take it real easy on the system so we have some time to dry it out. Because that the ground, your wastewater has to go into the ground. That's the whole point, is to separate the solids and the water, and then put the water into the ground for further treatment, and hopefully it gets treated before it hits the groundwater table. Now, if that soil is already saturated, and you really want to take it easy on what you're flooding down there, because the soil is already saturated, and if it's flooded, you probably got some really good depth of that saturation. So just really kind of take it real easy on how much you flush, and do laundry and all the other things, and try to minimize water use, well, water flushing, until it has some time to dry out. And if you have a well and that well is topped, that would definitely at least test it for bacteria, and possibly even chlorinate the well, just to make sure you're on the safe side.
Next question. Shouldn't cleaning the effluent filter be part of normal maintenance?
Yes, and actually, usually you have to do that sometimes more than when you're pumping the system. That effluent filter it's basically a piece of plastic with holes in it, and so depending on how much solids and grease and whatnot, those holes can clog up quicker than, say, your tank needs to be filled up with solids. So I've actually seen that the tank isn't due to be serviced, but they're having backup problems, or the tank is almost going to the surface because the filter is dirty. So the effluent filter definitely should be checked, at least every year, probably every 6 months, depending on use. But the filter definitely needs a lot more routine maintenance than everything else if you have one of those. But it's a good thing too, though, because it keeps any of those solids or any of those greases from going into the leach field, which could cause problems and cause the system to fail.
How far away does a willow tree need to be planted from a septic tank and field?
I'm not exactly sure about a willow tree's root.
They love water and they have very fibrous roots, so you do not want them close to your septic
Yeah,
field.
I know, like, pine trees don't have that bigger roots, but still want to keep them away. I mean, the best case scenario is, the further thing you can keep big trees away, the better. I've heard that sometimes a tree's roots can go up twice as far as their branches, which, you imagine your big oak trees and stuff. That's quite
Right.
quite a root system.
Yeah, I know willow trees, they're water loving, and so they're typically not advised to have near a septic field. So if you do have one close by, you might want to even consider getting rid of it, because if there's water nearby, it will find it, and it has
Hmm.
very fine roots that will be able to crack through a pipe very easily. So what is the best secondary treatment for an area subject to flooding?
I mean, that'd be really state specific. I would imagine if you're in an area um, subject to flooding, you also probably have a high groundwater table. Imagine some sort of close to, you know, a surface water source, if you will. Maybe a denitrification system to treat that effluent so it's not as nitrogen heavy before it goes to the ground. But it'd really be site specific and state specific, and what they would require for that kind of area. I know if you're in flood zones in some states, you can't even put a system in, so it's going to be really dependent. And sometimes they'll raise it up, you know, higher to hopefully prevent it from being topped over in flood. So.
And if you live in an area that's prone to flooding, definitely contact your local health department or even your local septic contractors, and they may be able to tell you what has and hasn't worked in the past in areas that are prone to flooding. The next question is, do you think it is important to have a registered soil scientist delineate a usable soil boundary prior to designing a soil-based system?
In the states I work in, it is required to have a soil evaluation and perk tester in order to put a new system in. So I would say yes. Again, it's state specific, but you're really designing the septic system based on the depth of groundwater and the kind of soil you have. So that is the basis for the design, really.
Okay. Now, how damaging is water softener backwash to a septic system? What advice do you have for alternative discharge of the backwash if a homeowner has limited space or the brine is killing their landscaping?
Um, I know in the states I work in, it's an automatic failure in a septic inspection to have it in there. I've heard of septic tanks just being kind of rotted out from there, and just concrete loosened and not standing up to the softened backwash, if you will. And you don't want to just go around into the ground. Your best bet is like a dry well. Just for that, that softener gets pumped into the dry well, and hopefully it's underneath the ground and doesn't ruin your landscaping. It sounds like it's probably just kind of pouring into the surface right now, which I've seen, and it's legal, but maybe a dry well, kind of away from your vegetation, might help the situation. I've seen it too, like an iron filter. Every time it backwashes the house, the whole side of the house was with iron. It was all rusted out. So he had to extend the pipe down the road, down his yard a little bit. But again, so whatever's in the backwash is going to show back up. So.
Is it true that going on vacation gives your septic tank time to reduce the waste pile up at the waste inlet?
Yeah, I mean, it could. While you're gone, it's sitting there, it's settling out. Biological processes are eating at the solids and hopefully breaking it down. So yeah, I mean, and it also gives your leach field a break too. It's not getting any flow, so that everything drains down, and so a week off probably is not a bad thing. Like I said, 6 months off, you're kind of starting fresh because the biological activity isn't there, because it has the system hasn't been fed. hasn't been kept warm, if you will. But a week off, it seems like would be a good thing for the system to just kind of, do its thing.
Mhm. Does installing bidets help the life of a septic system?
What is a bidet? I don't know what that
So
is.
a bidet is, instead of using toilet paper, you use a water to, it has
Oh,
a
okay.
water
I've seen that
stream
in
that washes you off instead of using toilet paper.
oh, okay. I've seen that in like movies in Europe and stuff. Okay. I would imagine so, but it's lowering the how much biologics, how much solids you're putting down. Um, couldn't tell you either way, but it makes sense to me if less solids going in there, the better it would be.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's
Especially if
gonna,
you're using the really thick toilet paper, like the question a few
yeah.
earlier.
Um, I think it would definitely help because you're going to, get rid of flushing pretty much the paper down. You still may have some, but um, I know during the pandemic, installing bidets became a hot trend because people, either couldn't find or couldn't afford toilet paper. And so bidets became a hot item at that point in time. And so, by reducing toilet paper, it's definitely going to help the life of your septic system.
Mm-hmm.
If the bacteria in a septic tank get eradicated because of, for example, a resident going through chemo, will pulling will pouring a half gallon of milk down the toilet restore the presence of bacteria?
I would say no. I don't know how a half gallon of milk would add to the bacteria, if you will, especially bacteria. Milk is usually pasteurized, so we know there's no bacteria in it, if you will. Um, yeah, so I would say no to that. Maybe if you're worried about the biological activity, maybe this would be the time to add some of the biological additives that were mentioned in earlier questions to kind of kickstart the system if it had been wiped out by someone, having chemo. But I've never heard of the milk situation. I imagine it would lower the pH, but that's kind of about it.
Um, if I recall last year, during this webinar, you mentioned that there were some additives that were showing some promise. Um, was that you, or did I just have a dream that that was something you said?
Well, some of the additives, there is some techniques they use around here to kind of regenerate septic leach fields that are failing, and it has part of that is adding additives and then adding usually aeration to make sure those biological additives multiply and stay alive, and kind of break down that leach field. That biomat in the leach field. But and I can maybe, like I said, for cases kind of like the kickstart the system, for something like this, or like a seasonal place that hasn't been used in 6 months, maybe kickstart the biological activity. But in normal cases, it just is not usually needed to add any because we add enough. In those biologic processes just continue on even when you pump the septic tank. There's still residual bacteria there that can recolonize the septic tank and move it or keep it biologically active, if you will. But maybe in circumstances like this when I want to kickstart it, like if you started if you ever had an aquarium and you got to add biological additives to the water before you put the fish in, kind of kickstart that biological activity, which might have some case to be do that, if you will.
Okay. Are sewer flies a sign that you have an issue with your septic tank?
If you're seeing sewer flies in your yard, most likely. It's probably not your septic tank, it's probably your leach field that's coming up. If it's coming out of your septic tank, you know, imagine then your leach field is so bad that it's coming up to the surface through the riser. But you know, from what I'm gathering, usually, yeah. Because if you know any on-site wastewater system, you shouldn't be seeing any of the water, any of the anything from it. Basically, it should all be underneath the ground, unless you're opening, you know, the manholes.
I would say, as a former food inspector, um, I was envisioning inside the house. So, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, the little fruit flies and drain gnats that you'll get inside is what I was envisioning. So it's interesting that, you know, you went outside and my mind went inside. Because if it's inside, you need to check and make sure, do you have, you know, produce that, you know, has gotten too ripe, or I know we used to get pizza from a restaurant and I'd get uh, fruit flies like 2 days later and I couldn't figure it out. Well, when I became a health inspector, um, the fruit flies were actually laying their eggs in the cardboard containers. And so then when I brought it home, they would hatch out. Stopped eating pizza there, by the way. Um, so if it's in the house, it may not necessarily be in connection with your septic system. You'll want to look around and make sure that you don't have, you know, produce laying around or um, like extra cardboard, anything like that. And you can also pour just a little bit of bleach water down your drains and make sure that they're not just growing underneath that bottom of the drain, like in the shower, for instance. I've seen.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, former food inspector myself, drain flies, very
Yep.
common. If you have a floor drain, you might want to pour some water down those too, because sometimes the traps dry out, and you know, sometimes you get flies. Usually, you get sewage odor coming in. That's what I used to notice a lot in restaurants, and like you go in the bathroom and all of a sudden there'll be a large sewage odor smell to the because of the floor drain. It dried out. You know, people come in with the mop bucket, they mop, they leave, they don't dump the mop bucket down there in the floor drain. Little by little, whatever's in the trap evaporates, and then that closed circuit becomes open.
Okay. Well, I think that is the end of our questions. We do have plenty of extra time. Um, I don't know. I was 20 minutes early on my portion of it, and I don't know what I skipped. So, Jim, is there anything else that you would like to let everyone know before we sign off? Do you have any interesting stories or any feedback or anything that you feel that would be beneficial for other EHPs or homeowners to know about their septic systems?
Um, the other thing I wanted to kind of, is, I mentioned it earlier, is you know, that some of the studies that we're seeing now in the Northeast is, you know, PFAS being, you know, seen a lot in areas of septic systems, and I've actually done some well assessments on people that had, you know, pretty elevated PFAS in their private wells, and nothing around that would really be the cause, you know, nothing, no you know, things that would make, you know, some kind of factory that was doing PFAS or some kind of fire or an airport or anything like that. You know, and sometimes the neighbor would test and they wouldn't have any. So we're really starting to see that, you know, it's in a lot of consumer products, and it's kind of what I mentioned about any kind of other chemical that might be going on is, you know, just, you know, be real mindful of what you're flushing down the toilet or down your drains, because, you know, some of the stuff just doesn't break down. The pharmaceuticals, like I mentioned, the PFAS, and probably a bunch of millions of other chemicals that I'm not even mentioned now and not really in the big scope. You know, it all goes into that aquifer. And, you know, even with the distance, you know, between your well and your septic being, you know, 100 feet plus, you know, we're seeing it show back up, because, you know, some of these things, they don't break down in nature. The septic system was made to break down biologics, and these are man-made chemicals that they just don't break down. They call it forever chemicals. So, be really mindful of what you dump down the drain, or what the chemicals you might even use, because there's so many chemicals in the world now, and
Right.
they all just kind of one big circle, if you will. So
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jim. We really appreciate you coming on and answering these questions. If anyone in the audience, if you have questions that you think of afterwards, just send them to us at info@privatewellclass.org, and we'll be sure and pass those on to Jim and have him answer those for you. Steve, do you have anything to add since we are running a little early today?
I don't, but it was, all the time answering questions, I think was super valuable. So again, thanks, Jim. And I learned a lot today about stuff I never knew that there was such a thing as flies, septic flies, were they called? Yeah.
Sewer flies.
Sewer flies. Yeah. I
drain
had
flies,
never
yeah.
heard that term before. So no, it's fine. It's quarter till. I think, yeah, again, our email's there. So guys did a great job.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. And remember, if you do need those NEHA or LEHP for Illinois CEs, just make sure that you turn in your paperwork. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@privatewellclass.org. Have a great day, everyone.